My name is Richie B, and you're listening to the Richie B Morning Show. We've been here since 6 o'clock, and we're now at a juncture where we have a very, very important agenda item, and that is, of course, Constitutionally Speaking. It's a segment brought to you courtesy of the Office of the Public Defender. Now, before I introduce my guest, the recent ruling by the Court of Appeal here in Jamaica freeing Dante Brooks, the son of dancehall artist Mavado Brooks, otherwise called, that should be David Brooks, otherwise called Mavado, has led to the police revealing that a warrant of arrest has been in existence for the father, Mr. David Brooks himself. However, Mavado is said to be living in the United States outside of the reach of Jamaica's law enforcement. Hence, there is talk going on that he may be extradited to have the warrant executed on him to face the Jamaican court. So in this segment, we wanted to look this morning at extradition and other forms of involuntary removal of individuals from one state to another, one country to another. And hopefully we'll be able to sort of explain it in a way that you will understand it. And I know for sure that Mr. Herbert McKenzie, the Deputy Public Defender, he has a way of breaking it down, even very technical legal matters, so that the average man in the street can understand. And for that, we're very, very grateful. We welcome the Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions now, Mr. Herbert McKenzie. Morning, Mr. Mack. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you, sir. I'm always head swollen by the way you introduce me.
But I'm not lying. I'm talking the truth every time. Please remember that.
Indeed, you know.
Yes.
It's extradition today.
Yeah, man. Extradition indeed. Take it away. What is extradition, I might ask?
But what it really is really the process whereby country A surrenders an individual to country B, where that individual is needed in country B because of crime accused of individual committing, or that individual has been convicted of a crime in country B. They usually refer to them as requested and requesting state. The country who is seeking the removal or the extradition of the person is called the requesting state in the treaty arrangement, and the country in which the individual resides as habitation is called a requested state. Mm-hmm. Now, it is a process which is based upon some form of diplomatic arrangement between the requested state and the requesting state. Or in other words, some form of treaty arrangement or ad hoc protocol between the two states. Mm-hmm. Now, extradition has become necessary and has gained prominence as transnational crimes increase. In the long past, a person could have committed a crime in, say, country A, and in order to avoid the arms of justice, the person takes flight and ends up in country B or country C. And once that person remains in country B, country A, in which he has committed a crime, has no way of holding him to account. Mm-hmm. Well, all of that changed years ago. And countries can now request a person accused of a crime or convicted of a crime in their country from the other country in which that person has fled. Now, like I say, it requires some form of agreement, arrangement between the two countries, and it is usually in the form of protocol, mm-hmm, or a treaty or a convention set up. Now, there are countries in which there is no standing treaty, protocol, or convention, but the arrangement is an ad hoc one, whereby as and when a situation occurs, depending on the circumstances, the requesting country can put in the request to the country in which the person is, and get the person back here. I think most Jamaicans. Mm-hmm. Sorry, you were about to say something.
Yes, no, I wanted you to finish the point, but bear in mind, I wanted to also ask you, just to break it down so we understand who is it that can be the subject of of this process. Okay. But go ahead, yes.
Good. All right. The person who can be the subject of an extradition, and of course the treaty has a name for him, they call him a fugitive, right, wrongly or wrongly. First of all, that person has to be in the country in which the state think he is. Because you can't fly a kite and say, I think he's in America, I think he's in Canada, so let me put the extradition request to the Canadian authorities. No. You as a requesting country has to ascertain that the person is there. No, the person must be one who was either committed a crime or accused of a crime in the country that is seeking extradition. There are certain things that have to actually met. I call it things rather than requirement because that's what they really are. Let me tell you the first one.
Yes.
Seems obvious is that there must be some form of arrangement, which we have mentioned repeatedly before.
Mm-hmm.
Another one is that the conduct which constitutes a crime must be such that that conduct would have amounted to a crime in both countries. They don't have to have the same name, but as long as the conduct itself amounts to a crime. And in extradition law, they look at conduct rather than nomenclature. So, for example, a lot of these American cases about mail fraud, mail this, that sort of thing. We don't have those names in Jamaica, but we have crimes that are equivalent in terms of the conduct or the act or the omission which a person would have done or refrained from doing, which makes it a crime. That's two. And by the way, that one, they never think for it, they call the rule of double criminality.
Mm.
The next thing is that the offense must be one which attracts a sentence of at least 12 months imprisonment. So, for example, things like a road traffic ticket, which attracts only a fine, will not be an extraditable offense. And that too must also attract that penalty within both states. Part of the principle of the double criminality, again. Mm-hmm. And like I say, the convicted person, there doesn't have to be any guarantee that he'll be awarded a punishment of 12 months or more. It is just that the law in each country with respect to each offense must be such that the penalty can attract the 12-month prison sentence.
Yes. Outside. Go ahead.
And the next point is that the offense for which extradition is sought, the country that is seeking the extradition of a fugitive can only prosecute that fugitive for that offense only.
Only. Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if Mr. A is sought to be extradited from Canada, and he sought to be extradited for manslaughter, if Jamaica extradite him, he comes to Jamaica. We can't try him for murder, even though the evidence is clear murder. Mm. That is the principle called the rule of speciality in the extradition law. Mm-hmm. I don't know if many Jamaicans remember, but there's a guy called Storyteller Morrison.
Yes, I remember that name.
Yeah. So that's one of the big arguments surrounding Storyteller Morrison case, because they're saying that Storyteller Morrison was extradited from Jamaica for a particular offense. But when he went to the United States, they prosecuted him for another offense, which was not the one for which he was extradited. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the big deal surrounding Storyteller Morrison.
I remember that case, yes.
Yeah. Oh, and in fact, it's still going on in the Supreme Court because he gets sued for some sort of damages or constitutional redress, and I don't think it has been settled. Certainly, up to early last year, 2024, it was still a live issue in the Supreme Court.
Okay.
Now, apart from the Storyteller Morrison case, I think most Jamaicans would agree that the most prominent extradition case in our history so far is the one involving Mr. Dodo Coke in 2010. People remember that one in which the request for its extradition came from the United States of America. And when the process went to a certain stage, it caused what we now know as some big issues. But let me go through the process, and then I'll come to that point in the process in which Dodo's case officially became fraught with problems. Of course, before it officially became fraught with problems, everybody knew what went on in West Kingston, for good or for bad. But this is how the process works. I'm going to try as much as possible not to push on Mr. Mavado's case, but to speak to the process generally.
Okay.
Let us say, we could put to this case, then because it's already adjudicated and he's gone. Say America wants Tom Jones. What the American authorities do, starting with their State Department in Washington, they submit the request through the diplomatic channel to the Jamaican embassy in Washington. The Jamaican embassy in Washington forwards the request to our Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Our Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and like I said, all that is done under diplomatic correspondence, confidential correspondence too. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs forwards it to the Ministry of National, days gone by, it was the Ministry of National Security. Now the two elements separated, that comes to the Ministry of Justice. Now the Ministry of Justice doesn't deal with it directly because there's a designated authority within our ministerial governance structure that deals with those issues. And in the case of Jamaica, that designated authority is the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. So the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will send it on to the DPP office. In the DPP office, there's quite a bit of mechanism that goes on in terms of documents, because the DPP goes to court once you receive the extradition request, and the extradition request can come in two forms. Talk about them later. Go to court and then get a local warrant of arrest for the fugitive. Because remember, the requesting state, in our example, America, would have identified that the fugitive is here, it's somewhere in Jamaica. Send all information or confidential cover, and then the DPP office haven't got the documents, and go to the court, in this case the parish court, and seek to get a warrant of arrest for the extradition fugitive. Once that is had, that is now fed to the police. The police have a division or a group or a formation called the Fugitive Apprehension Scheme. The Fugitive Apprehension Scheme takes that warrant and go in search of the fugitive. And this is where the story became a conflagration officially. Because once the warrant was received and the police launched its quest, the militia in and around Western Kingston sprang into action in a very active way. And as we can recall, the whole place was barricaded, and it demanded a greater response from the security forces. In fact, that operation May 2010 to apprehend them on the extradition warrant was the biggest joint military police operation anywhere in the Commonwealth Caribbean. Now, talking about Grenada in 1983, that wasn't a police military operation, that was an entirely military operation taking place in Grenada, led by the U.S. forces in collaboration with CARICOM troops spearheaded by Jamaica. So that's different. The Tivoli 2010 was the biggest joint police military operation ever in the Commonwealth Caribbean.
And unfortunately, lots of lives were lost.
Yes, exactly. And for a cheap shot, it was the then public defender, Mr. Earl, who did an investigation and then recommended that a commission of inquiry be held. Of course, that became a big, over 1 year running, and TV viewing, lots of excitement generated out of that. But to come back to our core point, once the extradition warrant is executed upon the person is taken into police custody, and then is carried before the court. The court examines the evidence to see if it meets all the requirements of law and extradition law before the court can commit him to custody pending extradition. Now, what you'll notice in that is that the process is really an executive process in which the court plays a lead role. Because if the court, based upon the law, finds that the evidence supports the request for extradition, the court does not extradite him, contrary to what people think. The court commits him to custody pending extradition.
In light of all that you have said so far, Mr. McKenzie, what comment would you have in relation to the David Brooks matter?
Let me just go straight to David Brooks' matter, since you asked that question.
Yeah.
In his case, if he's an American citizen and has cancelled, revoked, denied, completely removed himself from Jamaican citizenship, then it will have to be an extradition request. And Jamaica can put that easily in. That's not hard to do. People who are versed in extradition can get that. If he is not an American citizen, or even have dual citizenship, the American can use another way of involuntary removal, simple deportation. Deportation does not require a treaty. Deportation all it requires is that you be a citizen of the state to which you are deported, and the authority in the country, which you are, can simply invoke its sovereign power, put it back on a plane or a boat, and ship it back to the country where you are. In his case, if the request is made for him and the papers are drafted up properly by the DPP, it's going to be hard to see how he could resist a return. Otherwise, he can voluntarily return. It makes it simple. You buy a ticket, you come home, stay to the court, here am I. I'm submitting myself to the jurisdiction of the court. Which, as a lawyer, any lawyer examining his documents on the warrant, think that there's a sufficient case for him, probably should do that, because if they don't do that and he's returned involuntarily, he might find he has a problem getting bail because the court will always view him as a potential flight risk.
Mm-hmm. What a lot of persons find curious is the fact that now that his son has been freed by the Court of Appeal, they thought automatically that it would mean that whatever was out there in terms of a warrant for arrest of Dante's father, Mavado, would have been dropped. But that is definitely not the case based on what we're hearing through the police.
No, it's not. And without knowing the facts of the case, I can tell you this. If you and I are charged with a criminal offense, and they were charged, let's say we're charged with murder, and you're acquitted of murder. I'm not found, I skip town, or I disappear for whatever reason, good or bad, and you are charged, tried, and convicted. Your conviction does not automatically vitiate the charge against me, unless the evidence is such that you cannot be I can't be convicted without you being convicted. When the evidence is not like that, or the case or defense is not like that, the acquittal of you does not amount to an acquittal of me. Oh. And that applies whether you're acquitted at trial or you're acquitted in an appellate court. So the point is, it's going to be dependent upon the evidence that they have against him. Because also police sources say the reason he wasn't tried with his son was simply because he was out of the jurisdiction. And if that's the reason, then if that is the reason, nobody can fault the police from reviving the warrant. No. The strongest argument they could mount in court against it is say, it's an abuse of process. I mean, they might be made to the response that abuse of process, the man wasn't here. What could we have done?
Mm-hmm. This is a very, very interesting legal matter. I mean, we have not even gotten around to touching things like repatriation or expulsion and so on.
some other form of
yes.
Voluntary return. All of these are what they call rendition. So, like some of them, the other forms of involuntary return, when you don't like capture, people remember Adolf Eichmann, that they are Israeli captured in Brazil. Yes. Those are what you call irregular or unlawful rendition or extraordinary rendition. But we'll do these at other times. In fact, I think next week I might want to look at the Dante Brooks case itself and explain to our listeners how it is that he came to be acquitted on appeal.
All right. Sounds interesting. Definitely want to look out for. Mr. McKenzie, I thank you so much for the information you shared this morning on extradition primarily and all the deets you gave us. I thank you, and I wish you a great day today. Catch you next week, same time, 8:05 for Constitutional Speaking. Have a good one.
And to you and your staff members too, and your listeners.
All right. Thank you so much.